Now we're recording. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. So yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about my practice, but also kind of set it in a historical context. I make lover's eyes, and lover's eyes are sort of a very specific Georgian jewelry practice that was hot for about a half a century and then went away completely. Interestingly, for y'all, the Philadelphia Museum of Art has a really robust collection of lover's eyes if you're ever interested in seeing them. So what is a lover's eye? In 1785, the Prince of Wales fell in love with Maria Fitzherbert, who was a Catholic widow and thus could not, at that time, be made a queen. But he was so obsessed with her that they began this kind of like long distance courtship. And he sent her a picture of his eyeball, the first ever to be sent, along with a long letter asking for her hand in marriage. And when they got married clandestinely against the wishes of the crown, a couple years later, she returned the favor by giving him a lover's eye. And when this sort of hit the streets in Georgian England and France, the landed gentry started getting really excited about lover's eyes, largely because at that time, if you were rich, you were usually promised by your family in marriage to somebody from the time you were born. So the idea of infidelity was really, really normalized in ways that I think that we don't really have much of a relationship with anymore. Instead of thinking of infidelity as something that is incredibly taboo, they thought of it as sort of a compliment to yourself. So as long as it was look but don't touch, as long as you weren't cheating or stepping out on your wife or husband, it was exciting to be wanted. So clandestine secret lovers would send each other pictures of their eyes. And they were obviously somewhat anonymous, but it was very much a gaze upon gaze situation. And you'd wear them on a ring, you'd wear them as a hat pin, a brooch, etc. Interestingly, between 1785 and about 1830, when they kind of fell out of fashion, they went from being something you would wear to signal that you had a crush or that someone had a crush on you, and went to being pieces of remembrance for deceased loved ones. So it kind of it seemed that the concept of a lover's eye, whether it was about infidelity and crushes and affection and lust, or whether it was about mourning a lost loved one, had everything to do with memory and yearning. And so I got really interested in them, also because they're very just arresting to look at. You can see here that there are some that are for hats. There are some that are really, really ornate and kind of a way also to like flex how much money you had, because they were always luxury items. This one is a great example of someone crying diamonds, and on the back it will have like a lock of the deceased person's hair. This is another one that has locks of hair. This is in the Met. And so as I got more interested in lover's eyes, I read this book called Treasuring the Gaze by Hanneke Grottenbauer, who is the chair of art history at the Ruskin School in Cambridge in England. And she wrote a book that has, the book has a lot to do with kind of Lacan and the gaze and positioning the lover's eye as distinctly proto-photography. So it's a photographic impulse. And what she said about that was people were desperate to give each other not just an image of themselves, but a part of themselves. It's the look of someone that the lover's eye is a carrier of. It is the look that someone wants to imagine and wants to feel as resting upon themselves. And because of gendered social coding, men and women were not really socially permitted to hang out together very much. Being seen and seeing were, and kind of being witnessed, were really, really points of obsession in British and French culture at the time. And I started thinking about how we live in the age of like the iPhone, of snapping nudes and sending them to people, snapping selfies and sending them to people. We're also existing in a kind of post-COVID environment. Um, and that relationship with a screen mediated intimacy, our understanding of intimacy as inherently kind of prismatic almost, got me thinking about what it means to yearn for something and make an object out of it. And like how much of contemporary art is about creating totems to memory. And so I started toying around with that myself. So this is in the show. This is just my friend Franny's eyeball. I had to grab this from her for the show because I gave it to her. And I like this one specifically because it kind of like typifies all of the different components I've been putting into these. For instance, like most of them are painted or drawn on mirror backings, small mirror backings. Those are little plexiglass discs. I like the idea of a mirror kind of in absentia, or like the affect of a mirror. They're put together with industrial pond and stone sealant, which is definitely going to give me cancer. But the pond and stone sealant is something that you can just get from Home Depot, and it's designed for people who have koi ponds in their backyard. So it's like supposed to look like rocks, but it's just heinous foam. And then all of these different little pins. So I like the idea of them being made out of kind of material that's supposed to look fancier than it is. It's supposed to look like glass. It's supposed to look like granite. It's supposed to look like jewels, but it's actually just kind of a Michael's Redux situation. And so there's something about, I wanted to not make kind of like, in my opinion, somewhat like cheesy post-digital or like cyborg feminist work. I wanted to make something that talks about how mimesis and like synthetic intimacy feels when you can't be with somebody. This is also on the wall. This is, you know, I painted this in acrylic on the back of a necklace that broke. I also like having kind of tangible moments of, you know, belonging and like nods to the, I guess, makerly impulse. Like I'm reaching for things around me. This is one that is not in the show, that is also filled with broken mirrors. I, for these, also think a lot about size. Obviously, so much of the original Lover's Eyes and like historically Lover's Eyes, size is so important. They're miniature on purpose. And so I started thinking about like how a body kind of one-to-one relationship with the work functioned. And so a lot of what you see on the wall is like about face size. It's not quite, you know, it's not monumental. You're not necessarily being, you know, asked to walk around it or engage with it. It's a very intimate experience, but it still very much belongs on a wall. It's kind of like a white cube thing. It's not wearable. It's not a luxury item. So that's one of my mom that I did during COVID when I could not see her. That's one of my friend Zipporah that's in the show. Ooh, no, there we go. And that's one that's I did. And, you know, I've expanded also beyond strictly eyes, thinking about one of Hanneke Grottenbauer's points too is that the reason that Lover's Eyes have a relationship with photography is even, or rather they heralded in our relationship with photography, is because it also had everything to do with cropping. You were deciding what kind of visual experience you wanted to have. So I started playing around more with like cropping body. This is in the show. And I included this because it's the first time I ever used the pin and foam technique. And this is Pandora's box relief with a box on it, pretty on the nose. But for those of you who are artists and art students, I will tell you a tale, and hopefully you will not do what I did, which is that I showed this painting in Detroit. And the day I was installing, I decided that I wanted it to look different than it was. So in the gallery, as I was installing, I did this like foam thing for the first time. I like ran to Home Depot, decided this might look cool, made it up as I was going. And then I had to put in 200 pins by hand in a chair while I was sitting there, as it was like dripping on the floor. It was not my finest moment, but it ended up looking pretty cool. So yeah, try to ever plan things, which I am not that good at, as Pamela knows well. And yeah, this I also made for the show. This I wanted to include this because it's like a kind of a pared down version of the more ornate work. This is my sister's boyfriend's eye. And I liked the idea of just really stripping back all of the kind of bells and whistles that I have been applying to the work. And I think it ended up being pretty effective. It's a nice little drawing. And I think we're done.
We can see you. There you are.
There we go.
Okay, that's good.
Thanks, guys.
So now we have questions. Any questions, guys? Process questions, anything?
I have a question.
Sure.
Can you hear me from here or no?
Huh?
Can you hear me from here or no?
Yeah, I can hear you. You just have to shout.
Okay. So when you're like painting the eyes, do you take a picture of it or?
Oh yeah, usually, yeah, with eyes, I rarely do them totally from life. That would be ideal. But yeah, typically I usually ask people to take pictures for me of their eyes, which is also fun because then you get to see kind of, it's always really fun to ask people to take selfies for you for art, because then you get to see like how they want to be perceived. I've done a ton of portraits, and my sort of newish body of work, I'm doing a lot of nude portraits, and watching people sort of send me the like MySpace angle like this and like filtered stuff, and I'm like, I'm not gonna draw that, you know, has been very interesting. But yeah, I typically take pictures or work from photos.
Is the glove also like out of the record? Like a relic from the past of that person?
Yeah, relic from the past. There's definitely, without putting too much about business in the street, there's like 3 different ex-boyfriends on that wall. There's a certain amount of definitely pulling things out of storage and being like, oh, do I want to show this? So yeah, relics from the past, and also like, you know, the one that's kind of, you guys would be like directly in front of, is that has the girl with the incredible eyelashes, is my friend Akiko, who lives in San Diego, and I just made a lover's eye because I miss her. I don't see her as much as I'd like. Also, that's tough because she's like if any of you are portrait artists, I don't know if you ever come across this, but she's like upsettingly beautiful. She's like the most beautiful person. And so every time I draw her, it looks like I've done a bad job and I've just like created an anime girl or something. So every time I look at that piece, I'm like, no, that's what she looks like, I promise.
I just look like an idiot right now, so I don't really want to say anything.
Let's go.
Oh my God. I mean, I just want to say that the work is beautiful. Like, I'm looking at it up close like this, and you can just really see all the fine details that you put into your pieces. And I really need to focus on more like portraiture stuff. So like seeing the way that you do eyes like really inspired me.
Oh, that's so nice. Yeah, I will say that if you're trying to like get better at portraits or just like thinking more about incorporating portraiture into your work, I highly recommend just drawing eyeballs because they're really, really hard. And if you can get good at eyes, especially kind of, I'm from Boston and there's a portrait by John Singer Sargent that's in their permanent collection that I always kept coming back to when I was younger. And it's because it was the first time I could tell that an artist was not using white in the eyes at all. Like the eyes were blue because the skin, like the white of the eyes had to be blue because he needed to be able to actually create glints with pure white, just like 2 or 3 times as the highest white. And that changed the game for me. Most, with maybe 2 exceptions, most of the eyes you can tell, even just the graphite one, are not white in the eyes, and it makes them look way more realistic if you're like actually pairing color.
One of the words has someone with their eyes closed, their whole face.
Oh yeah, that one. Yeah, so sorry to say this, but that one I got really obsessed with drawing and painting silicone for a while, specifically sex doll faces. And so that is like an unstuffed like in the process of being made sex doll face that I just found a picture of like from behind the scenes at a factory for sex dolls. So I have a series of those as well that are a little gnarly to look at. But that one I thought was vague enough that I could include it. But yeah, that's sort of Lover's Eye adjacent. I also wanted to have an opportunity to use a lot of like vintage hat pins. And they're the only time I've really gravitated towards that in the series. But because I think they're a little much, even for me. But yeah, so that one is a very sad sex doll.
What about the glove?
Oh, the glove is a piece. Yeah, just that was kind of like a material exploration piece. That is I was watching Pan's Labyrinth, and you know how they have the monster with the eyeballs. So I was like, ooh, maybe I'll make one of those. And that's an eyeball again of an ex-boyfriend who that I decided to stick a bunch of pins in.
Which is your favorite?
Which is my favorite? I really like the one on the pedestal around the corner, the one of my friend Franny. I think the size really works, and I like that it sits on its own. I think the ones that hang on the wall are really, really nice because you can kind of walk around them, but there's something about when they have a little bit more of a sculptural edge that I think is a little more dynamic in space. I'm working on one right now of my current boyfriend who has a real job, and so he wears ties sometimes, and he showed me what a tie roller was, which is like a cylindrical leather, very small parcel that you roll your tie in, and that's how you keep your ties. And I was so blown away by the fact that these things exist that he gave me one, and so I've cut a hole in it, and I'm putting a little eyeball in there. So, and I liked the idea of that being, you know, kind of going back to the history of the lover's eye, something you can hold, or something that looks like you can hold it.
Any questions? Yeah. We had a very visually overload show before you, It was great, but it was very, very busy. So when I came in and saw yours, it was like, oh, it's like, you know, more zen, more relief. And that's the way you hung it too, because it's not crowded.
Yeah. I think it's also with hanging too, especially if you make small work, there's always this tendency to be like, well, I'll just put up 30 things because everything's so small. But I think it's good if they have a little bit of space and like you're invited more to engage with them. Especially like in my drawing practice too, I make lots of little drawings, and when I show them, I'm always very obnoxious about putting like 3 on a wall because I'm like, no, I want people to look at them, you know.
It's hung really beautiful. What about going with the string? Was there a reason for hanging that one with the string?
The one with 2 eyeballs in it.
Yes.
Yeah, that's just because I drew it on the back of a necklace. It's just like hanging from the necklace. I think one of my like big blind spots as an artist is I really don't think about hanging them or how they're going to look on a wall until very late in the game. That's not interesting to me. So sometimes I end up with work that I'm like, how on earth am I going to hang this object? So sometimes putting in like a little loop or, you know, anything that makes it a little easier for me to just knock it on the wall is helpful. But I also liked the kind of nod to jewelry.
Pins in the wood.
I'm sorry?
Pins like on a piece of wood.
Let's see. The wood. Oh yeah. There's no wood, but there's one that's on a piece of collage. And has like a bunch of sponge in it. That's just of my eye, which I made. Oh, the collage was from a book on anatomical Venuses. I don't know if you guys know about those, but they were yeah, the 18th century was a bad time for ladies. And doctors were just figuring out that like ladies had body parts and stuff. And so in order to learn in medical school what was going on inside a woman, they started making anatomical wax models. But because, you know, why just make a straightforward wax model when you could make it sexy? The anatomical Venuses became very much the rage. And there were these unbelievably beautiful nude women that you then in medical school got to vivisect, so you could take out all their organs. Very, very grotesque. And they got so popular that they got to the point where artisans would like pair up with watchmakers so they could put like automaton kind of mechanical engineering inside them to make them breathe and stuff. It's very, very gnarly. But yeah, I have a book about them because I had bad interests, as you can tell. And it's very, very, very beautiful. And there was one page in particular that just had like this big wax nipple on it that I thought was great. So that's that little piece of collage underneath there.
Interesting stuff. Anybody else? Comments or questions? Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. All right.
Now we all have books, we have to look up and figure out what some of the things you were talking about. Actually, I was going to get the book that you showed in the beginning. Nice.
Yeah. Lover's Eyes are great. Go to your local museum and see if they have any. Interestingly, the largest collection of Lover's Eyes is private and in Alabama. It's just like some guy owns like something crazy, like 400 Lover's Eyes. He like found all of them. So a part of me really wants to email that man. Be like, can I please just come into your home? But that would require going to Alabama, and I'm not interested in doing that. But yeah, I will. Shall we end the Zoom here?
Are we good?
Yeah.
Any other questions? Good. Yeah, we're good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Sorry, I don't know that the calls have come up looking like